My name is Dave Asheim, and I started a company called Guide Buy Sell about 16 years or so ago, and we now go by Engage Buy Sell. We provide thousands of cultural venues like many of the folks on the call today. Crocker Art Museum is a client of ours, for example, and with all kinds of different mobile engagement services. And one of the first folks that I met, probably, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago when I first met Nik. And Nik, you were at the Getty, I believe, when I first stumbled on you, and you guys started using one of our mobile services. And maybe tell us a little bit about your background, Nik, because you've had a pretty interesting, varied career.
Sure. So I was at the Getty before where I am right now, which is the Balboa Park Online Collaborative, BPOC. We're a non-profit located in Balboa Park. If you're familiar with that, it's a cultural destination, about 30 cultural institutes in a very densely packed, gorgeous landscape. And we provide a suite of services for those folks. We also work with folks across the US. Previously, I was at the Getty when I met Dave, head of administration. And before that, I was in the UK. You can probably tell I'm not a San Diego native. In the UK, working for a small startup on the South Coast. Always my entire career being in museums and technology since the mid-80s.
And involved with AAM, involved with speaking, very well known. If some of you have known Nik from the past and you have something really nice to say that in the chat so that we can give Nik some cred here. But
just ask when the expert's going to turn up, and then we can start.
That's right. Well, we'll start with you, Nik, and then if the expert comes, and we'll go from there. Nik is really one of the great thought leaders that I've found. He's been an advisor to our organization. Just is so fascinating to talk to Nik. And so we're so glad that Nik is here. We will add our contact info at the end of the webinar. We'll probably finish in 45 minutes or so. We think we're going to have so much extra material to cover that we may end up doing a part 2 in 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll let you know based on how much material we can get through. But Nik is a real futurist when it comes to the practical application of what's going on in museums. Nik, when you and I talked about how to structure this discussion, I think the key word was attendance. And it sure got an awful lot of people their emotions riled, I think, when we put that teaser headline about is museum attendance declining, and is that really the issue we should cover today? What do you think? Is attendance, the way we think about it, the issue that we need to be focused on?
There are clearly issues with physical attendance, right? If you look at the data, a lot of folks are still down 30, 40%. I mean, I like to think about presence and connection, right? So attendance is the result of a bunch of other activities that you might regard as some kind of attendance. We like to think of, what is your entire attendance? How much of it is physical? How much of it is digital? I think one of the key messages that I'm certainly hearing, and actually across a bunch of disciplines, not just museums, attractions, other cultural heritage places, is you can't claim to be coming back from COVID right now. And the thought that your attendance will magically come back to what it was pre-pandemic, I think is not the way to think about this. I think what your attendance, your physical attendance is right now is your baseline. So you really need to up your game and fight to increase that, right? And I think that's really in the context of before pandemic, mostly physical, everybody was physically programming. Pandemic happens, everybody transitions kind of 100%, with the exception of open sites, historic site, those kinds of things, to digital engagement. Pretty much many people were doing that. But now it's, well, what do? We've built this digital presence. We are charged with doing physical programming, again, being open, but we still need to do the digital stuff. And arguably, increasingly, the digital stuff is more important. But these two things need to work together, right? So how do you blend? And that's a lot of the work we do, is how do you balance those two things so that they're not completely additive, right? How do they work together?
Is physical attendance not going to return because of Asian visitors? Is it the movie theater complex where I just have gotten out of the habit of going to the theater or going to church? What's the driving factor that makes you think it's just not going to come back to pre-COVID, at least for most museums?
It's just changed, right? And so it can come back. And some folks on the call, your attendance may be back to, or even there are instances where institutions are actually seeing better than pre-pandemic attendance. There is clearly a problem if you're a tourism destination and rely heavily on the Asian tourist market. That is going to be a problem for a couple of years, but there's no reason for you not to now focus on, well, how do we build attendance right now? So you've got to work for it. You can't just assume that people are gradually coming back because you're fighting for the attention of them, and you're fighting to be honored by their free time, right? That's really what it is.
How many of your clients are thinking still in kind of an analog format versus where so many museums like the Cleveland Museum of Art and others really pushed the digital format? Do you think most people are not including that in their metrics and their stats of what they need to really grow?
Well, I don't think they appreciate the connection, right? I think if you look at what happened post-pandemic, the institutions that seemed to do much better and we're seeing closer to pre-pandemic numbers or even better were the ones that invested much more heavily in digital activity and connection during the pandemic. It's possible that there is some other underlying reasons for that, but if you look at the data, anybody who follows Colleen Dillon Schneider, there's plenty of data there that shows there were certain activities that correlate during the pandemic that correlate to decent attendance now rather than some of the others. I mean, look at those big museums, the Met, Art Institute Chicago. I mean, those places, Guggenheim, I mean, they're 50-60% down in some instances. So it's a challenge. So it's, well, how do we reset? How do we rethink what it is to do digital and physical programming? How do those connect? And really, what do we need to change to our physical programming in order to bring back our attendance? Because if you look at the data, it's, if people don't think anything's changed, they're not going to come and see you, right? That's the kind of big, why we went last year, nothing's changed. Maybe there's an exhibition, maybe that's enough. But, you have to give people a reason to come back. And it doesn't have to be, super blockbuster. It just has to be some decent reasoning. And particularly, if you're challenged with tourism, the tourism market, then focusing on community is a critical activity. If your repeat visit is, if your average repeat visit is maybe twice a year, maybe 3, you add 1 to that, that's a 50% increase, right? So how get into a mode of figuring out how to achieve that? And as you might expect, I have some suggestions.
Right, I'm sure you do. Are you saying, though, from an analog point of view, that the museums need to change things up more frequently than the once every 6 to 12 months? Or what is it that can get that person back to the museum?
So to think that you've got to, so you're in this mode, museums are still in this mode of, we do an exhibition, it's up for 3 months, 6 months, we do another exhibition. You have a downtime in between, so you're in this stop-start mode, as opposed to rethinking, well, what would happen if we had an evolving exhibition, right? What would happen if, so looking to things like Netflix, right? Netflix is a valid competitor. The couch, this evolving narratives, a cliffhanger, serialization. You should know that Netflix started off with just binge watching, right? It used to be, here's a series, you can binge watch it. Now, much more staged releases across everything. Prime, across Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, they've realized that it's much more beneficial to keep people on the hook, provide a evolving narrative released stage by stage. So what might that look like for an exhibition? How might an exhibition evolve over time? And how might content that is then going out to the community marrying with that physical exhibition? I mean, one of the give you a good example. So Natural History Museum, right? So Natural History Museum have challenges talking about how do you communicate geological time and how, you know, the evolution and the changes in the landscape, the flora, the fauna, animals, all that kind of stuff. So compress, you know, geological time to a year, create an exhibition where, you know, every month, you know, you're in a new, you know, era or epoch. So you talk about that. So you got content to deliver, it's changing. You're giving these people opportunity to then come and see, oh, you know, now we're in the Cretaceous period at whatever. So, you know, let's go. So just changing the thinking around programming so that you're not creating this kind of additive process. And I think that's a real challenge with museums, this kind of additive mentality, particularly as you're thinking more about digital activity.
Well, and there's quite a few articles I've read, and you're a big proponent that more stuff, more things on display, more acquisitions, which maybe the executive director has grown up thinking is counterintuitive and is exactly the wrong way to approach kind of the way to grow here.
Yeah, more is not more. You know, in the digital world, you're in stiff competition for attention, right? And if you're trying to do more, you're just diluting your ability to create a quality message that is going to stand above the crowd. And that's really what your strategy should be. How do we stop doing some things? How do we look at what is working? How do we focus resources on creating quality digital products that are going to stand above everybody else and get everybody's attention? Because so much stuff, it just goes into the static. I mean, we all know, any of us who have membership emails lists, you know, going out, it's just, you know, how many emails do I get from institutions and how often do I actually, you know, read them?
So sending, doubling the number of emails that go out for membership and exhibits, which is what the executive director may want to do,
right,
is not what you're suggesting is going to help get people in the door.
I would not, you know, it hurts staff, right? It just, you know, you're overworked, you know, focus on quality. Less is more. I think, you know, I don't think about any other industry when what gets you noticed is the quality experience, right? Whether it's, you know, restaurants eating out, you know, whether it's a movie theater that's now providing some kind of additional experience, you know, they're raising the quality to get the attention. Because you want to make, what you do literally wants to be remarkable, right? You want people to remark on it on their social media channels. So create those experiences, those opportunities, and then help people, you know, share those things across their network. Because that's, you know, don't rely on your own activities and work to kind of build networks and presence, rely on other people.
Are you finding that a lot of museums are wanting to kind of rehire and retool and restaff and kind of fill all those positions that they had before COVID? And what's your advice on that?
You know, it's the challenge is museums are remarkably bad at helping people. You know, museums, the manifestation of this is too many meetings, too many internal meetings, emails, right? Yep. It's because there is lack of clarity about what everybody's doing. You know, focusing, you know, we always, when we engage in strategic engagements, we always want to talk to HR, right? Because your ability to do all this stuff is based on particularly in the digital world, is based on your staff's ability to deliver it. Staff is the absolute key asset here. So staff need to be, you know, excited, charged, given the tools that they need, given the professional development, giving the training, and HR should be the department to do that. And I always love asking a question at the beginning of an engagement, which is, if HR were to walk into the room, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? You know, it should be a good thing, right? It should be employee retention, employee productivity, you know, all these things are going to help you deliver on your mission, whether it's, you know, departmental, you know, your individual goals, you know, and development, or whether it's the institution.
That is such an important point. But here's an HR department and maybe a managerial structure that is focused on people coming into the building, seeing the assets that they're displaying, and to move to a digital world, you're talking about a lot of different kinds of personalities. You know, it used to be we'd have those three web gals or guys over here, and now you're basically saying we need to really rethink the way we're trying to grow this business, and it's not going to be from assets on hand. It's going to be a lot more digital. Right. And that's going to provide a challenge, isn't it, with a normal HR department to try to recruit and retain and hire people that might want to work in Spokane, but your museum's in El Paso?
It's a, you know, baseline of literacy. I mean, there needs to be an expectation because digital technology touches everything, right? It should be a productivity tool. It should enhance the work that you do. There should be, you know, one thing we face is this notion of an expense mindset against an investment mindset, right? If somebody needs something to do their job, it's not about, well, it's going to cost me, you know, $200 to buy this application to help me do my job. And, you know, maybe the finance person says, we don't have $200 to spend on that. As opposed to, if you spend $200 on this person in their job and it gives them an hour a day back, or makes them their productivity increase by an hour a day, that's a lot, you know, across 8 people, that's a whole new person.
Yeah.
So there is this lack of understanding about what investment in staff and tools really means. How many of us labor with internal productivity tools? You know, Teams is a classic one of it's not the easiest tool to learn, despite being called a productivity tool. And that, I think, you know, building a baseline of internal comfort with technology extends to then the outside and some of the audience facing things that you can do. Because when you're bringing, certainly when we come in to do digital strategy, digital transformation, many people are reluctant or at least apprehensive because they think it's going to, you know, well, I'm going to lose my job, or I don't know how that works. I don't want to learn it, you know, but it's an enhancement, right? It's an empowering strategy to help you get rid of the mundane, repetitive stuff and focus on the more creative productivity stuff, particularly around engagement and the collection or the interpretation of your site or whatever it is.
So let's say HR is successful in hiring some of these digital natives and the board and executive director is on board. What are examples? You saw some of the organizations that are on the call today. What are examples, 4 or 5 examples of digital activities that can help reshape the museum's future?
If you look at emerging generations and anybody who either has kids, nieces, nephews, who are in that kind of, you know, anything up from about 12, 15 years old, video is what they're looking at. I mean, I have 2 girls. They go on YouTube rather than, you know, streaming TV. They go on YouTube to find things, right? They explicitly go to video sites, Reels on Instagram, YouTube, you know, whatever it is, they're going there to consume. There's this notion of, I don't know whether we talked about the Gutenberg parenthesis. Did we talk about that?
No, talk about it. Let's hear about it.
So there's this, evolutionarily speaking, right? We have been a species that communicates orally, right? Oral tradition, stories told down generation after generation. So, and I'm paraphrasing and generalizing, but with the Gutenberg press, we went to a much more written, read way of telling stories and communicating. If you look at what's happening in schools right now, you know, kids don't learn script, right? But joined up writing. And more, you know, if you look at the stats on voice search, I think globally, 40% of Google searches are now voice. I think it's closer to 60% in the US, right? So interaction with technology is becoming much more spoken. video, whether it's commands or whether it's video, people are consuming things less in the written world. So we seem to be coming to the end of this kind of mass literacy in terms of being able to read and write. I mean, it sounds weird, but at some point, all our interactions are going to be voice, right? I mean, you look at AI coming, natural language processing, language models, all these kinds of things are steering us less towards writing and potentially reading as well, and more towards consuming orally.
Right.
And so video is an absolute, I believe, emerging necessity. So you need to figure out a much more of a video strategy to engage.
And video might be as simple as a video discussion with the curator walking around the museum, exploring some objects, and that might be stored and uploaded onto YouTube. It can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a National Geographic video special.
An iPhone, if you really want to be professional, you can get some LED lights, couple of, maybe $100, not even. Some reflectors. I mean, you could spend $300 and create a pretty decent environment to capture video. And I think, your goals certainly around digital programming are building digital presence, right? Because your digital presence it's like a gravitational potential well, right? The more content you have, the more likely you are to attract people. Part of your strategy should be how does our ecosystem work? Why do we have Twitter, and what is our goal with Twitter? Why do we have YouTube? What is our goal with YouTube? Why do we have a website? Sounds like a stupid question, but there was a time when that was a valid question. In the early 2000s, it's like, well, do we need it? We don't want a website because people may not come. We know that's not true, and actually the opposite is true. What do we use Instagram for? How do we do these journey mapping exercises of how are you directing your audiences around your digital presence to what, using what to achieve what, which should be, your website is where you have most control over content. So how do you scale your digital presence? By creating more digital content, appropriately organized. And then how do you convert? That's the absolute, that's the two watchwords, right? Scale digital presence, convert it. And convert might be get people to our website, convert them to a member, get them to our website, convert them to a physical visitor, get them somewhere to consume this lecture. So scale and convert should be kind of key watchwords.
And don't spend a lot of money. Do little short 2, 3, 4 minutes, maybe a TikTok, maybe something really short. It can be with interviews with experts. It can be with interviews with staff. It can be with the painter or the sculptor. And put that up in your channel.
Absolutely. And Josie has a great comment. The second from last word, fun, right? Look at the motivators to return to institutions. It's have fun. Number one motivator is to have fun. Number two is a social experience. So, group encounter. And number three is to learn something new. And I think we don't do a good job of creating fun out of the things that we do. And we all know that's the things that we consume, right? We want to consume fun things.
And part of that is the shift, which is so easy to say, but hard to do, from an analog to a digital experience. In an analog experience, if I come to the Guggenheim, I might not be there for fun, but I'm going to enjoy my day, but it's not going to be fun. If I need to get your daughters to the Guggenheim YouTube channel, it's going to have to be fun. It just can't be a lecture.
Right.
It has to be something fun, just like what Josie is saying.
There's a great example, and I reckon I'll find that link and send it. There's a great example that Net did around their Medici exhibition. Medici portraiture, 400 or 500 years old, can be a very dry topic, but they created, and the woman who developed all the content for her, she's used to work at the Met, and it took us some time to convince them that this was the way to go. But Medici portraits, in the context of the world we live in now, selfies, influencers, brand building, all those kinds of things, that's exactly what Medici portraits were, right? You would stage, you'd have stuff behind you, you'd have stuff in front of you that was all symbolic about how important, how educated you were. You know, we stack our bookshelves with books that we want people to think that we read, you know. We exactly the same as Medici. So they created this, it's a Medici primer, and it takes you through all this stuff and selfies, you know, YouTube influencers all merged in with Medici portraiture. So it's fun. It's relevant to today. It's teaching you about something, you know, historic and important. And it was very successful in attracting a much younger demographic. And the beauty of it is it works both ways, right? So you could consume that online. It's great. You're learning about Medici portraiture. You can just go to the Met and see the Medici portraits if that's what you want to do. But that content is there in the exhibition as well. So you've got this, and it enhances the experience if you want to consume that digital layer as well. And that's the kind of perfect scenario.
And the benefit that the Met is getting is what? I mean, what do the people on this call today, how do they make this tangible? How do they say to my superior, I want to go in this direction? Because the age-old metrics of attendance and membership may not apply in the same way. So how do I make the case for moving in this direction?
I mean, partly making the case is changing direction, right? So the things are evolving, you know.
Yeah.
Apparently Wayne Gretzky never did say, I skate to where the puck's going to be, but that's really what people should be doing. You know, we know that in 5 years, 10 years time, demographics that are consuming just wholly digital right now are going to be the ones spending the money. So you have to skate towards that part. Okay. You know, you have to be bringing in, you know, museums tend not to do a good job of attracting, you know, school groups. Kids come to the museums and then they lose them. You know, when the school stops bringing them, they lose them till they're maybe early 20s, mid 20s, when they've got their own kids and they've got more free time. You know, that's a magic age that museums, institutions, historic sites, you know, whatever you are, can connect with that audiences. Kind of like my example about the pandemic, and folks who are continuing to do digital programming saw the results of it at the end. It's a bit more of a long game now, but you know, you need to be, what is that Greek proverb about planting trees under which you will never shade from the sun, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. So in that example, have the videos as the teaser for those young school groups that they can all consume for hours and hours on their own. And then they build up an excitement so that when they come to the museum, it's an extension of that digital experience, and it enhances their visit, and they want to do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic marketing, right? You know, getting peppered with product placement and product mentions is not necessarily that you're going to immediately go out and buy that thing, although, you know, certainly on social media channels that does happen. You know, you promote something and there's a link to the store to buy it. But it's more about that moment when you're going to make a decision about doing something, particularly attendance. It's like, oh, you know, I've had this, you know, experience of consuming some really fun content from my local historic site. Let's go there, right? I mean, it's the same thing. So some of it's the long game, and some of it's we're doing something right now, and timeliness and live is a key component to this. Yes, a digital strategy, digital presence should be about building an increasing resource and ensuring that that is well organized, so you're taking as much advantage of your search engine optimization strategy as possible. But some of it's timely and some of it is the long game. You just have to figure out a strategy to kind of ensure that that's not an additive process in terms of workload and, you know, those kinds of things.
When you say live, do you mean at 2 o'clock we're having a live discussion about XYZ in the gallery, or just online, or trying to?
It has to be worth people's time to do it, right? I think, you know, don't just turn on the camera and record somebody, right? If you want to do something live, then make sure there's something about it that requires you to be there. I mean, the classic is, you know, a football game or a basketball game or a hockey game or whatever it is. You know, there is nobody wants to watch a recording of, a classic game, right? People want to watch it. Most people want to watch it live, and if they're going to record it, they don't want to talk to anybody until they've watched it, right? There is this premium. So how do you create that kind of expectation and that desire in some of the things that you're doing? There's a classic example at the Huntington Gardens up in LA, where they have this flower that blooms one day a year, right? And people turn up in their thousands to see this thing. Not all of us have such a specialized plant to be able to do that, but maybe there is something that you can do that is a meaningful, desirable, just-in-time experience.
Yeah, that should be a part of a live digital experience for the people around the world, and now it brings recognition to the Huntington.
Right. So people want to see it and stand next to it because apparently it smells like something unmentionable,
something bad. Right.
So there's that kind of other sensorial experience with it, but also people will want to see it live happen because they want to see it live.
Yep. Metrics used to be how many members did I have and how many people came through my door. I'm guessing membership now, we need to think about that more like a subscription, and attendance is done through the door, but through all these other channels. Maybe talk about that for a second.
Sure. I mean, there's a good example in Australia where Australian museums got together and said, we're just going to talk about general interaction, and a percentage of it's going to be on site and a percentage of it's going to be online, and all is valuable, right? Because at some point the digital people are going to probably come and be the physical people. So think about it differently and maybe track those changes. But the challenge with metrics is what we refer to as kind of rear view mirror metrics, right? It's like, what was my membership? Oftentimes, sequenced with board reports or, monthly leadership meetings or whatever. It's like, this is what happened last week or last month. That doesn't help you grow, right? You're just, unless you are doing a bunch of analysis on why it was what it was, but you're always on the back foot, right? You're always saying, well, how did membership last month change from the month before, as opposed to kind of more forward looking, so rather than rear view mirrored metrics, it's more about kind of anticipatory, right? And so things, important metrics to track are things like intent to visit, right? Because that is forward looking, right? That's trying to figure out what are we doing now that is going to cause a visit in the future, and then tracking that, as this kind of moving window. I mean, attendance is one market, but looking and experimenting in what you're doing, getting into this much more kind of nimble, kind of innovative kind of mindset about metrics, because metrics can help you if you're doing things right. One example would be, we did a project with a museum trying to figure out what were the key topics and subjects that had driven exhibitions over the last 5 years, right? So we came up with these 5 or 6 categories. It was a photography museum, right? So it was kind of portraiture, or it was, local artists, photographers. It was black and white. Map that against all your attendance data and look at if there are some obvious trends in there. If it's portraiture, then think about portraiture as a key driver, and pivot towards that. I mean, you've got to balance what you're doing with your mission, right? This kind of Venn diagram is like, mission driven, we should be doing this, but what do our audience want? What do they want to consume? And then what we have the ability to do, right? So this kind of 3 circles, figure out what's in the middle. Mission driven, what our audiences want to consume, and what can we actually do? And that's your kind of sweet spot. So focusing, bringing more things together in that sweet spot, should help you drive attendance. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, should we stop thinking about it as membership, but more like subscription? Because if we ask your daughters would they like to be a member or would they like to subscribe on a $9.95 a month basis, it's pretty obvious they probably would not even know what a membership is.
Yeah, it's nonsensical to emerging generations, right? It's like, I mean, happy to pay for subscriptions,
Yeah.
Apple Store, whatever is Apple Music, Netflix,
Right.
but the challenge is there is still a fairly large demographic that understands what membership is, right? So you've got to account for that, and then you've got to start bringing in these new models. And so subscription would be, one new model that might be a feeder into your membership program, right? So it's not all or nothing. It's not we all got to do subscription now. The challenge is, how do we do both? Again, that's a challenge of, well, how do we not make it additive? And sometimes it may just be, we call it subscription, but it's really, all the content is membership driven, but we just frame it differently. And then, the challenge with that is then, okay, so we're going to start taking subscription payments, monthly. So how efficient is that? Are there underlying tools for us to be able to support that? So all these things come into play, because you don't want to create more work for yourself. You always want to figure out, if we're trying to scale, this whole notion of scale and convert, make sure you're dealing with inefficiencies first, because if you're going to scale, you're going to scale your inefficiencies if you have them.
Well, then you are a big believer in technology. That's obviously our strong suit at our company, and you and I worked on some projects together where digital membership cards or texting or maps or whatever can really enhance the visit, as well as enhance getting people outside of the museum to participate. We've got YouTube channels and ChatGPT and on and on and on. It's easy to say, let's embrace technology, but how does the average person on this call really embrace that technology? What's your advice for them?
You got to pick your battles, right? It's like, how do you maximize your content creation in terms of presence and deployment? So short videos are probably had the highest return on investment in terms of engagement, right? So, short videos, Instagram Reels, YouTube, there's any number of platforms for which that works. TikTok, if anybody's on TikTok, again, another platform for you to deliver a video to. And I think, we always, your goal certainly from a content generation standpoint, videos are important. Actually, audio, look at how big podcasts are now. And all these platforms have some form of monetization attached to them, right? Most of the people on these platforms, certainly a large majority of them, are using those platforms as income, as revenue.
Absolutely.
Great. I think the poster child for certainly for the museum community is Corning Museum of Glass, right? They've been doing high quality, long form video for maybe a decade now. They switched on monetization, I think, just before the pandemic. They're seeing around, and this will sound a lot, somewhere between 160 and 200,000 a year in revenue from monetization and from subscription. So monetization, turn on adverts, get people to subscribe to your channel, and you get a small piece of that when people consume it.
Right.
The YouTube, $5 per 1,000 views. So again, this is where scale comes in, right? So you're doing two things. You're scaling up your digital presence. You can monetize it, and that may be an interesting discussion with your board about whether people are happy to see adverts with your content. They don't care. They just skim past them. And then, YouTube is, the second most visited website on the planet, right? So how are you building a presence there and then directing people back to your website? How are you using all these third-party platforms to increase your traffic to your website, again, to convert to membership, subscription, lectures, visit? And
that's where your audience is. It's not from sending mailers out to the public or sending more emails to the same audience that you've been sending emails to, when 20% are read and 80% are spam. You have got to use these digital techniques, or the growth not only will be stopped, it'll just keep on going down.
You need a blend, right? Because there is some data suggests that certain demographics are going to see kind of snail mail more than they're going to see digital. Right? And that may be, one of your largest kind of contributors from a donation membership standpoint. It's possible that that's true. So again, this is where metrics comes in, right? Figure out, make some assumptions about your membership, your constituent data around what they want to consume. Maybe give them the choice. Self-service. Increasingly people want self-service access to any encounter with an institution, right? We all know we can go on Netflix to our account and we can change things and add people and all that kind of stuff. People want that self-service. They want that control.
Yep. Last topic let's cover is how to pull this off. And I think it's it comes under the heading of innovation. And I'm guessing you have some thoughts on how do people innovate and really pull this off?
So the misconception is innovation is this kind of unstructured place, right? But the opposite is true. Our strategic recommendations always follow three phases, right? Again, it kind of goes back to this. If your goal is to scale, you got to fix your inefficiencies first. So you've got to secure your own oxygen mask. Look at the systems that you have, look at the people that you have, and fix those inefficiencies, whether it's training, professional development, new tools, whatever it is, processes, fix those inefficiencies. Our principle is, how do we give everybody on staff at least an hour back a day? Like I said, for every 8 people, that's a whole new, and that's easy to do. Just with some protocol around meetings and emails, it's very easy to do. A mismatched technology is probably worse than manual, right? Because you've got this barrier to getting stuff done.
Right.
So fix efficiencies first. Then focus on sustaining, right? And compress things, because you want to have this common understanding about how most things work, day-to-day operations, how to find things, where things are, what's, guidelines, protocol, all those kinds of things. And when you've got that done, that's when you can start innovating and experimenting. There's a thread of data in there, in using data internally as well to kind of track productivity. But then you want to be in this place, because if you're going to your leadership and saying, I want to try this new thing, they're immediately going to think it's risky. They're immediately going to think it's expensive, right? That's just how they will interpret, we want to do this new thing. So figure out, do the work to figure out, well, how do we mitigate the risk? How do we anticipate what's going to happen? And that comes from truly understanding your audience, truly understanding what they're doing, what do they want? And pitch it as, we're going to try this experiment, right?
Right.
We did an A/B test with, as one example, with Curator written wall labels and ChatGPT written wall labels.
Right.
10 out of 10 people want the ChatGPT, not only because it was much more familiar language, but then it's actually a conversation, right? So a wall label, static thing, here it is, hours, if not days, of a bunch of people, arm wrestling to have their sentence in there, as opposed to having a conversation with a painting, right? Yeah. And in any language, at any level.
That can spur some controversies at museums.
It's unless Elon Musk has his way, this is going to happen, right?
It's happening. I think it's happening.
And the trick is, and I think it'll kind of recess it'll be a layer behind, right? So for you, Engage by Cell, backed by, language model,
right.
AI, all that kind of thing. So people may not know they're engaging with AI, they're engaging with you, so right. This is quickly, while it's a product that was launched, ChatGPT, there's any number of other language models out there.
Yeah.
A product that was launched, it's quickly going to become a service, right? Yeah. You can have a ChatGPT service in Google Sheets to help you do all that stuff. So it's going to regress.
Well, we've even started embedding that in our software. So if clients want to schedule text messages to go out, let's say it's a leadership training, we have a little pop-up that it's an API into ChatGPT, and they can say 10 tips on leadership training. There they are, and they are really excellent. Press a button, and they're scheduled as a text message. It's just unbelievable how this can benefit everybody on the call. My recommendation there is, if all of you have not got your own ChatGPT or whatever AI model it is, go do that this afternoon and start asking it some questions. Design an exercise program for a 25-year-old, whatever it happens to be. You will be astounded. That's a fair statement, wouldn't you say, Nick?
That is an absolutely fair statement. We use it on a daily basis. I mean, to create it, it gets you further quicker. I mean, you definitely have to go in and do stuff with it. And I think, you know, for institutions, you need to start having a conversation now about how it can improve what you do. You may want to start thinking about internal productivity first to get the organization comfortable with it, particularly leadership, and particularly, you know, the interpretive curatorial folks who may have an allergic reaction to it. But you can train it. You know, you can create your own environment. You know, you can
just
say,
using it for email has been a fantastic way for everybody on the call here. Ask it to create an email to this kind of a donor base or this member and see what comes out, and get as specific as you want.
But so then, okay, 6 months time, when you've got natural language processing, you open well, maybe you don't even have to open an email window anyway. You know, I mean, people do this all the time. Siri, you know, new email, and you say what you want to say. You say, clean it up, make it sound more professional and formal, and send it. You know, this whole natural language interaction with technology is rapidly coming to the forefront.
Yeah, so that's our Nick and my suggestion for your homework assignment, everybody. Go get your free account, and free is a good word.
And
Brittany,
don't panic.
And don't panic. Well, you will panic, especially if you're a curator. Brittany, if you could show some of those questions. We asked some of you in advance if you had some specific questions for Nick, and we're going to show a slide here. Nick, let's just see if you've covered some of these. Some of these are newer ones. That's an interesting one, the first one about in-person and virtual.
Like I said, the in-person, you know, what's the premium for the in-person? You know, think about it. Just always, you know, question your assumptions. You know, you used to do it this way. How would you do it now? What is the compelling reason to have somebody come in person? Is there a compelling reason to stream it live, or is it better to record it? You know, because, you know, and the long tail, you know, you're going to get much more. You're going to get, even if you get a couple of dozen people, you know that it's going to be somewhere, it's going to be accessible, and over time, it's part of your, you know, growing repository of information. So I think you've got to be, there isn't a clear-cut answer. You may do some analysis on how things have worked previously. You know, we did this thing, and this is what happened. These were the topics and the subjects. You got these types of people, and you know, do some experiments. You know, we recorded it, we posted it live. Oh, look, you know, after 6 months, 3 times as many people have seen it. Was it worth doing it live? Maybe. You know, what was special about that? So it's hard to give a single answer, but you just need to be more thoughtful and critical about whether what you're doing is actually going to work in the media.
And if you're really trying to get 3x of people to know about you, this is the first bullet is a perfect way to do it. I know, Nick, from our clients that use us for, let's say, tours, if they put a QR code to their tour on their website, traffic goes up 300%. And it's from all over the United States, all over the world, that are now interested in this little history museum in Columbus, Georgia. They never knew about it, but somehow they got to that page. It's just amazing how it expands exponentially.
Adoption is about utility, right? If it's easy to do and you make it easy for people to do it, they'll do it.
Yeah. Second one about locals. That's an interesting angle. What do you think?
So we kind of covered that in terms of, you know, how do you create an evolving narrative that is going to give people a reason to come back to you? Sometimes, you know, don't always assume that attendance and engagement is in your building. You know, look for partnerships, right? If you're trying to go for a community or a demographic that you haven't previously served, don't try and do it on your own. You know, partner with somebody who is already in that community or serving that demographic. I think there's some great examples of how that can be successful and grow and get in front of new audiences, particularly locals.
Breaking the bank. These services are not expensive. Many of them are free, right, Nick? I mean,
most of these
digital services, maybe you need, some lights, some cameras, and maybe an extra person or two, but this is not an expensive venture.
I mean, invest in the knowledge internally, right? You've got free, so spend a couple of $100 just to up, lighting and stability are key things in videos. Being thoughtful about the content, right? People don't care if video's crap. Actually, this is interesting. If video doesn't have high quality, people don't mind it, right? If audio has low quality, people are much more likely to get frustrated with it.
Right.
So decent microphone is key. An iPhone, movies are being shot on iPhones, right? The technology is there, and the technology is there to capture and produce. The iMovie, if you have a Mac, or there's any other number of video editing software that's free. Some of it's online. But then think about so that's the creation and production side, but then thinking about the consumption, right? Don't think that you have to have technology in your galleries or your spaces. So you're using phones. Engage by Cell. You're using phones to deliver. You're using somebody's technology to deliver content. Much better to focus on content production and creation than it is to worry about supporting touchscreens and other technology in your site, which there may be great reasons to do that, but don't think it's the first go-to when you're trying to engage an audience.
Yep, we have an interesting chat, if you see it, from Robert, which I think kind of ties into this. What are your thoughts on digitization of exhibits? History museums being on the front line. That is so true. People say, been there, done that. Nothing's new at the History Museum. It's the same history that was there when I was a kid. Digitizing can help this, I'm guessing.
So I again, going back to my natural history example, think about a historic house, right? Think about the life of the house. How might that translate to an annual program, an evolving narrative annually? To get people to come back. Maybe you have things in storage that you can bring out that people haven't seen before. But sometimes just providing a different perspective and a different context can encourage people to come and visit you. I don't recommend just what's the benefit of a 360 tour of your historic house? Yeah, okay. I'd encourage you to spend much more time on the interpretation side. So that example I cited about the net, right? So fabulous primer and an educational guide to Medici portraiture. That's all there, right? It has nothing to do with the installation and the hanging and all that kind of stuff. It's something much more engaging and leveraging the medium on which it's delivered. So I think digitizing, don't think you have to do everything. Again, focus on quality. Pick some key pieces that have great stories.
And come up with an interesting story. I mean, it could be a day in the life of this artifact starting in January here in Peru, Illinois, and take that through December. So it could be almost like a Netflix series talking about this room.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just get creative, and experiment. See what works, and don't think. Museums often try something once and say, well, that didn't work, and then they don't do it again, right? That is the wrong approach, and any entrepreneur knows that you have more failures, but it guides you in the right way to a success. So understand why the thing didn't work, make some tweaks, and see if it improves, right? So see if the next time you see an improvement in something. And if it does, then you're on the right track. So just keep going. But you have to believe in what you're doing as well.
Yeah. This last bullet, does the nature that I'm not collecting admission make much of a difference in what we're talking about today, or does it apply to university and academic museums as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we work with academic museums, and they are, while they're not challenged with increasing attendance revenue, they're certainly charged with increasing the presence of the museum,
right,
in the context of the community. So it kind of goes back to that engagement for locals, right? So, you know, where we are, we're on a campus of a bunch of museums, and we have this notion of far, near, and in, right? So far is we do digital stuff to tell people about what happens in the park. Near, people are in the park, so like students are on campus, and then in, how do you get people physically through the doors? You know, most university museums are challenged with whatever the discipline of the museum is. It's going to be those courses, those students are in that. So if it's an art museum, you know, art history is going to be the core audience. But how do you bring other students into the because your mission isn't just about teaching what it's possible that it is, but it should be interpreted more broadly. You know,
right.
You want to justify to, you know, the university leadership that you are, you know, you are engaging with a broader audience.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Brittany, maybe show the final slide where we've got some contact info. My recommendation for all of you is get your AI chat GPT account, and maybe even before that, give Nik a call. All these topics, Nik is advising so many brain centers, museums. Nik's got a wide array here, and he would love to talk with all of you. I think many of you have met Nik at AAM and other conferences, but his consulting firm is fantastic. And I just highly recommend picking up the phone or sending Nik an email and just seeing if he can help you navigate some of this shift. And on my side, if any of you are interested in using some of these technologies, they're not expensive, and be glad to advise you on what seems to make the most sense for you all. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the nice words here, Amanda and Robert, etc. But as I said, please reach out to Nik. We will send all of you Nik's contact information in the morning, and recording of this presentation. We're thinking about doing one about AI and about ChatGPT and NFTs. That would be a fascinating one. So stay tuned for that. Maybe in May we'll have that pulled off. Thanks, Nik, and thanks everybody.
Appreciate it,
really appreciate all of you sticking around and learning about Nik's views and how to improve the museum experience. All right.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good day, everybody. Thanks again. Bye.